Welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio, the number one podcast for IT executives seeking insights on the impact and opportunities for innovation that automation is delivering to businesses around the world. Featuring thought leaders in AI, machine learning, orchestration, security automation, and the future of work. And now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone. My name is Guy Nadivi, and I'm the host of Intelligent Automation Radio. Our guest on today's episode is Troy Dumoulin, Vice President of Research and Development at Pink Elephant, a premier global training, consulting, and conference service provider. Now, I have no doubt that many members of our audience have either taken Pink Elephant training or attended a Pink Elephant event. And Troy is a leading ITIL IT governance and lean IT authority with a solid and rich background in executive IT management consulting. He was also one of the 12 architects on ITIL 4, and given his extensive expertise with business process reengineering and organizational transformation, we thought our listeners would enjoy hearing his thoughts on these issues from an ITSM practitioner standpoint. So we've invited Troy to come on the show because we're eager to get his insights about the intersection between ITIL and automation, AI, and other transformative technologies. Troy, welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio.
Thank you, Guy. It's definitely a pleasure to be here today.
Troy, our show is very focused on an IT executive demographic, all of whom I'm sure have heard of ITIL and ITSM, but I wonder if you'd indulge us a little bit and define these from your perspective.
Absolutely. So, it's always an interesting question I'm asked, what is ITIL? Because it really is what we've always done. In my role, Guy, I often get asked to come and speak to senior leadership teams and describe to them the goings on in the ITIL and ITSM worlds. And I asked them a few questions before I even start. I said, well, tell me, guys, today, do you have practices and management capabilities for sitting down with your customers and sitting down and asking and figuring out where they're going and how you can help them? Yes, of course we do. Obviously. Okay. All right, great. Then you take those conversations and you capture those requirements somehow in a meaningful way that you can verify that you've heard what has been said and share it back. Yes, that's what we do. All right, then you hand those over to someone else to kind of figure out how we're going to blueprint it, and then we're going to actually get it done, whether it's a project or not a project. We have to get it acquired or built, and then we've got to somehow again validate before we move it into production this thing called the requirements that we first gathered on the front end. Yes, your point. Well, hold on a second. Then we move those things into production once we verify that it won't blow up upon arrival. And of course, then you get the honor to support and run and deliver value that you've initially helped develop and co-created with your customer. He said, what's your point? I said, well, congratulations, folks. You're doing ITIL. Because all that ITIL has ever been, IT service management, and that's what we talk about, is a set of organizational capabilities for taking requirements or demand and translating those through a complex value chain to the other side until we get value on the other end. Basically, it's a value chain. And the recent version of ITIL 4 is very much oriented and visualized that way. Now, the interesting thing is people often think, well, that's service management over here, and that's architecture over there, and that's project management over there, and that's software development over there, as if somehow these things are all separate, distinct, and independent. Well, they are different organizational capabilities. I'll grant you that, Guy. But here's what ITIL has always done. It's the gift of ITIL, I like to call it. A three-step process. Every single major version, iteration, whatever you'd like to call it, it figures out what we're all talking about. So it aggregates, it pulls in. Aggregates is the key word here. All of the different topics du jour, right? Things we're talking about. And then it integrates what seemingly was independent, but is not. Because these things all work together, or they should. And then it republishes a new picture, codifying the new holistic view of the IT management workspace. And this new picture becomes the new version. So it's always a lag indicator. It doesn't lead. It doesn't invent anything. ITIL has never invented anything. And service management is just another way, without using the word ITIL, to talk about just the general organizational capabilities, aka things we must be good at, to take demand and produce value. So I often I get a chuckle. The conversation is usually starting, can you tell us about this new thing that you're trying to introduce to us and prove to us why we should do it? And in essence, because I've just asked them these questions, they say, congratulations, folks, you're doing everything ITIL talks about now. Not one thing that ITIL covers doesn't already exist in your organization. It's not whether it exists or not, it's whether you have it under intentional governance and management, and whether you understand how it all connects in the bigger, ecosphere of value generation. And so that's the initial going in conversation is, congratulations, you're already doing it, but are you focused on it? And because typically they're not. They'll be focused on technology, maybe on structure, but very, very, very infrequently on an operating model of IT management practices. That's service management. So what is service management? Yes, anything your organization does in the soft skills, people side, process area, we could call service management. So I'm not sure if that was the answer you were looking for, but that is, in essence, what is service management today?
Well, no, it's interesting that you define service management that way, because in a recent article on Pink Elephant's blog, you make a provocative statement that, quote, service management process and tool projects are really organizational change projects in disguise, end quote. So in your experience, Troy, what percentage of ITSM projects successfully transform an organization, and what factors do the successful ones share in common?
Yeah, so let me unpack that statement a little bit. So you know what they say, hindsight is 2020, or wisdom is accumulated experience. So after 20 plus years in the industry of seeing many projects not succeed, I had to do a little insight here and thinking about the basis of what you just asked me. So the reality is, most organizations don't recognize that the true problem we're trying to solve here is to gain agreement and alignment of the organization, organizations, plural, inside our value chain, so that we can agree what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and do it hopefully in a consistent, coherent, and high velocity way. In essence, it's an organizational change project. And the process and the tool are very important, but they're not the goal, they're enablers to the goal. So I sit down and I hammer out through this dialogue all of these discussions with folks around how are we going to get stuff done. We finally, through negotiation, horse training, all of that, agree what it is. But then we've got to actually codify it quickly before we forget and leave the room. Otherwise, we leave the room, it's open subjective debate. So we've got to write it down and constitutionalize it. We, the people, find it self-evident and true, and we have signed here. Right, so documents are important, but more as a constitutional aspect of agreement. And then you've got to have this tool, right? You got to make it visible. The principle of Judoka in Lean says you cannot govern or manage what you cannot see. So putting it in a tool makes it visible, makes it measurable, makes it even automated in the sense of flow of work and the visibility of the flow of work or lack thereof. So the tool is really critical as well. We'll call it a critical success factor, an enabler, but it's not the goal. The goal was agreement. We have all these diverse organizations which want to have the right to independent thought and practice. The document was simply to document agreement that we finally hammered out. The tool was to make it visible. But here's the problem. The goal or the deliverable of the project was the agreement, not the document nor the tool. And so they're enablers. You can't work without them. But most organizations who don't recognize that what they're really up against is a people change project, which is supported by process and tools, will invariably fail because they focus on the wrong stuff. I mean, Guy, think about this. How many times in your professional career have you seen people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, on process documentation and tool implementation, go live, and the very next day, nobody does anything different? Right? It completely fails to deliver the value after a 6-month to a year project. Have you ever seen this?
More times than I care to recount, actually.
So what's the definition of insanity?
Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
But this time it's going to work. We're going to slap the easy button. So here's your answer. Most organizations fail miserably when they think it's a tool or a process project. And this is what I'm now proposing. I speak a lot about DevOps, and I talk about this whole the DevOps tool chain, it's obviously a great thing. If I could find a way to automate code flow from the point of code commit all the way to deployment without, stopping, and I've got all these things verifying production assurance, verification of test results, etc., and I can deploy in a high velocity way, this would be awesome. This tool chain sounds wonderful. But there are 5 questions that I've been able to articulate, and I've written it on my blog. Maybe we can link to it, but the reality is these are the 5 questions that CIOs and leaders would have to be able to answer before their organization could ever use a shared tool or tool chain like I've described. The first question I've kind of already articulated: can we agree that we need to agree across silos on anything? Right? Agree to agree. That's the first question. Second question: can we agree, please, on one way to do it? Because unless it provides strategic differentiated value, variation in lean actually has an impact on quality, cost, and speed. Right? Can we agree on one way, please? One way? OMG, as long as it's my way. No, one way. Okay, third question. Can we agree that we've got one way, we keep it simple, because we're engineers, we'll over-engineer everything to the point of almost usability. Question 4, can we agree if we're going to do it one way, can we do it one tool, unless it's a strategic differentiating tool? Again, a system of parity means it doesn't give us more money to have multiple variability here, or get us more market share, just cost us more in impact speed. So can we reduce variability and come up with one tool to do the one way? And the final question is, can we agree that that one tool isn't a point solution or best of breed? It's an integrated tool system. Folks, it's a tool chain. The output of one tool becomes the input of another, which is the output, et cetera, et cetera. And this is interesting because these 5 questions you would have to be able to answer as a leadership team before that organization would ever use a shared tool chain. Because in where I work and how I often see this play out, Guy, is that people can't even get past question 1. And none of those questions are actually process or tool questions, really. They're organizational culture, leadership, and organizational will. And what I typically see is not one shared platform as a service technology being used in a multi-tenancy way by product teams. Each product team develops their own tool chain. And nowhere in any DevOps literature have I read that's the actual intent.
Now, you just touched upon the fact that, to begin with, people just need to agree. And Tony Saldana is a former vice president of Procter & Gamble that recently appeared as a guest on our show. He published a book in 2019 called Why Digital Transformations Fail, which claims that the failure rate for these projects is as high as 84%. And Tony attributes that high rate of failure to basically 2 things: lack of leadership and lack of creativity, which you kind of touched upon. But I'm curious, Troy, from an ITIL/ITSM perspective, what are the primary factors you see derailing organizational change projects?
I completely agree with Tony's premise. Let's take it from this angle. 2 things. Again, as you mentioned, I'm a lean advocate, and lean leadership is a big part of the philosophy of how Toyota, succeeds year over year and is still one of the highest brands. And they talk about persistent adaptation towards true north values and direction. This is the premise, though. True north means we have a shared outlook and shared view of where we're all going. Andy Stanley was once quoted to say, "We all end up somewhere. Some of us actually get there on purpose." So action or movement in its own right is not value necessarily, right? It's a perception, perhaps, of value, but it's not necessarily unless we are getting somewhere we plan to go. That being said, that means that leadership in this question, in this situation, has to basically deliver 2 things, and this is a principle out of the Shingo Institute connected to Utah State, that leaders create systems thinking. We, the people, include all of these different stakeholder groups, both our brand and all those embedded now third-party vendors we call partners. We, the system, right? Systems thinking. And then the other is, once we have a system identity, constancy of purpose. We're all going there. Where are we going? We're going there. We're going there because velocity is speed with direction over there. And we're going to do it the same way. We're going to share the same values, beliefs, practices, and the same basis for prioritization of work. And this is what leadership is. It's called alignment. right? Pulling everybody together, pulling in the same direction. And then we get velocity, which is speed with direction. So this principle of failure is key because we lack systems thinking. Or if we think systems, we only think technology systems, because let's take the word systems integration. So I have this vision in my head of a systems integration approach to technology, data layer, infrastructure, all of that, application layer, in an integrated system. Well, to use that integrated systems integration, I would have to have an integrated set of management practices, because that's what it's automating, which would mean I have an integrated organizational context, right? We, all the people, work together in a cross-functional product team like this. So think of it in your mind like a 3-layer stack. Yes, I have an automation layer, but I have a practice layer, and on top of that, an organization layer. Or if you want to flip them, organization layer comes first as the basis, and you go up this way. When people think systems thinking, they only think technology. But again, that's a means to the end. Systems thinking, if you're going to use that premise, because we have a management system, a technology system, an organizational system, is to have this much more holistic view. Because with integrated tech, it doesn't mean I've got people to agree.
Now, speaking of principles, Troy, principle 7 of ITIL 4, the last principle of the latest ITIL framework, is, quote, optimize and automate, end quote. I've read that this principle is considered by many to be a first step towards acknowledging the need for more AI and automation in ITSM. So, from your considerable ITSM practitioner perspective, where do AI and automation add the most value to ITSM?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's our business, first of all. We are in the business of automation and technology, so we should be good at doing that. And what do we typically automate? First of all, if we can standardize a practice, we can all agree that this is what we're doing, and then stabilize it, then we should automate it, because we should get on to higher value heuristic versus algorithmic work, right? But that would be dependent on us agreeing to stabilize and have standards, which, by the way, is a dependency for all of this. And if we can actually do that, then awesome. We should automate it, because machine learning and artificial intelligence are excellent at detecting patterns that we, the people, can't see, because we have the ability to see massive data correlation, right? This is data analytics, machine learning, data science. This is the whole basis of what information technology is, as compared to operational technology. Information technology is to manage the information and data in such a way we can make decisions based on the automation of data correlation, right? So we, the people, can be learning from machine learning and pattern recognition, AI ops, etc. I have an event. If I see so many events of a certain nature within a certain time frame, maybe that might predict a failure. Let's avoid it. Or can I see this event so many times within a certain time frame, show me there's a pattern with an unstable environmental component I should remove, aka problem management. So machine learning, artificial intelligence, the automation of all of that helps we, the people, make better decisions, which is the premise of information technology, versus operations technology as machine teaches machine. Right? Do this, change this, because this condition is met for the purpose of machine automation. So this is critical for us to make better decisions. But take a page out of Google's SRE, right? They say, well, 50% of what we do we'll call toil. That's the stuff, the manual administration, kind of standard operations. And we'd like to reduce that as much as possible through automation, because the other 50% of a sysadmin's time should be on innovation, should be on finding ways to automate the thing we call toil, so that we can get up and start working on higher value, more heuristic work. We can't do that well without knowing what the data says, and that is the value in the blessing of machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Troy, for the CIOs, CTOs, and other IT executives listening in, what is the one big must-have piece of advice you'd like them to take away from our discussion with regards to organizational transformation?
Yeah, we need to go back to your first observation, that when we realize that transformation really is a people change project, that really process and tool projects are people change projects in disguise, and that process and tools, while critically enabling, are valuable, they're not the goal. They're the enablers. They're not the goal themselves. If we can focus on first principles in this way, understanding the organizational alignment is the predictor of systems alignment, then we're going to get somewhere. But not until we realize that that is the goal.
All right. Looks like that's all the time we have for on this episode of Intelligent Automation Radio. Troy, I can say with confidence that you're the most distinguished ITIL/ITSM expert we've ever had on this podcast, and I'm sure I speak for our listeners when I say it's been very educational tapping into your insights to gain a better understanding about this space. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us today.
Thank you, Guy, for inviting me.
Troy Dumoulin, Vice President of Research and Development at Pink Elephant, a premier global training, consulting, and conference service provider. Thank you for listening, everyone, and remember, don't hesitate, automate. Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We publish new shows regularly, and you won't want to miss one. And please remember to give us a rating. It helps others find the show. Intelligent Automation Radio is sponsored by Ayehu, the leader in intelligent automation solutions for IT and cybersecurity. You can get more information about Ayehu by visiting our website at ayehu.com. That's AYEHU.com. Ayehu, creating the successful path to the self-driving enterprise.